A desperate family had nothing to eat, until a stranger arrived carrying their entire Christmas. Elsa watched the blizzard seal them in, her breath fogging the single cold pane of glass. The Montana winter had been cruel, but the silence inside the small homestead was worse. 7 months ago, a logging accident took Lars, her husband. Now, the snow outside mirrored the emptiness within, a vast white shroud over the world and her spirit. A poor harvest had emptied their cellar months ago. What little remained was now buried under the storm's relentless breath. She turned from the window, the chill gnawing through her worn sweater. In the quiet main room, 4 tin bowls sat on the rough-hewn table. For Hans, for Ingrid, for little Sven, and for baby Lise. They were a hollow promise. The stockings above the fireplace hung slack, holding only dust and wishes. Her children's thin faces, their hopeful whispers from the loft last night, haunted her. She had promised nothing, yet their faith felt like a weight she could no longer carry. "Mama?" A small voice drifted down from the sleeping loft. "Has the morning come?" It was Ingrid. Elsa swallowed hard, her throat raw. "It has, my love," she called back, forcing strength into her voice. "Is it Christmas?" Hans asked, his voice older, trying to sound sure. Elsa pressed her palms flat on the table, her head bowing. "Yes," she whispered to the empty room. But the truth was a stone in her gut. The flower bin held only ghosts. The salt pork was a memory. There was tea, and there was hot water. That was all. The sound that broke the morning's despair wasn't from inside. It was the slow, heavy crunch of snow under wagon wheels. Elsa's head snapped up. No one came this far out, not since Lars. Not since the folks in the valley below decided a widow with foreign roots was more burden than neighbor. She rushed back to the window, wiping the glass. A single horse, a powerful dray, labored through the drifts pulling a sled. The driver was bundled thick against the cold. John McCready. The solitary rancher from the high pasture. A man known for speaking more to his cattle than to people. What was he doing here on a day like this? The sled stopped. The big man climbed down, movement stiff, and strode toward her door without pause. A firm knock shook the timber. Elsa opened it a crack, the icy wind stealing her breath. "Mr. McCready?" "Need a hand," he stated, his voice a low rumble. He didn't wait for permission, turning back to the sled. Confused, Elsa wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped out. He was already pulling back a stiff canvas tarpaulin. Beneath it lay a bounty that stole the words from her lips. A hunch of smoked venison. Sacks of oats and potatoes. A tin of real coffee. A jar of honey. A cloth bag of dried cherries. And tucked beside it all, a small paper twist of peppermint sticks. I have no way to pay for this," Elsa stammered, the cold suddenly insignificant beside her rising shame. "We have nothing." John hefted a sack onto his shoulder, his gaze steady. "Didn't ask for payment. Had a surplus. Letting it spoil while young'uns go wanting is poor management." His tone was practical, leaving no room for argument. Kindness needs no ledger, its only proof is a full table. The cabin door creaked open behind her. 4 small faces peered out, eyes wide as moons. They stared at the sled, then at the giant stranger. "Is that food?" Hans breathed. Elsa looked from her children's hungry hope to this grim, unexpected savior. "Why?" she asked, the word barely a sound. John met her eyes. "You'll decide if it's charity or neighborly sense. But decide inside. It's freezing." "Help him," Elsa said, the command unlocking something in her chest. Hans and Sven darted forward. He didn't just deliver the goods. John McCready came inside. He saw the dying fire and returned from his sled with armloads of split pine. He built the flames until heat finally began to pulse back the deep cold. He filled the big kettle himself. "I can manage the cooking," Elsa offered, stepping forward. "I don't doubt it," he said, not pausing. "But I'm here, and I'm hungry too." A flicker of something like a smile touched his eyes. "We'll manage it together." And so they did. The cabin, silent for so long, filled with the sounds of life, the sizzle of venison in the pan, the rattle of oats boiling, the chatter of children given a sudden, tangible hope. The smell was intoxicating. John poured a cup of strong coffee and handed it to Elsa. "Drink. You look pale." She took it, the heat seeping into her frozen fingers. The first rich sip brought a flood of tears she could no longer hold back. She sat, and Ingrid climbed into her lap, clutching a peppermint stick. "Is this a feast, Mama?" "Yes, my heart," Elsa wept softly. "It is a feast." They ate together at the crowded table. The children ate with a focused joy that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. John sat at one end, a quiet, solid presence. He listened to Hans talk about tracking a fox. He nodded solemnly at Ingrid's description of her repaired doll. He treated them not as pitiful orphans, but as young people worth listening to. Afterwards, warmth and fullness created a peaceful haze. The storm, however, raged harder outside. "You cannot go back in this," Elsa said, looking at the white fury beyond the windows. John hesitated, glancing at the children's expectant faces. "I'll bed down in the lean-to. The horse needs shelter." "Nonsense," Elsa said firmly. "You will sleep by the fire. It is the least we can offer." That evening, he sat in Lars's old chair. The children gathered at his feet. He told them no fairy tales, but stories of the high country, of elk herds moving like shadows through the pines, of eagles riding the mountain winds, of the first green shoots after a long winter's sleep. Baby Lise fell asleep curled against his boot. His large, work-worn hand came to rest gently on her small back, a gesture so tender Elsa had to look away. He stayed for 2 days. He fixed the drafty door, showed Hans how to split wood properly, and mended the roof where the snow seeped in. He worked with them, not for them. When the sky finally cleared, a path to the valley settlement was visible. "We are going to the Sunday service," Elsa announced, wearing her best dress. "To give thanks." She looked at John. "Will you come?" He shifted uncomfortably. "The town, they talk. Me being here is one thing. Walking in together is another." "Let them talk," Elsa said, her chin lifting. "I am tired of being a ghost in their eyes. You are our friend. That is truth enough." John studied her determined face, then gave a single, slow nod. The walk to the small chapel was long. When they entered, the rustle of books ceased. Every head turned. The preacher's words faltered. A woman in the front pew gasped. The sight of the reclusive rancher beside the Swedish widow and her 4 children was a story they had not prepared for. They took a seat at the back. Whispers coiled around them like smoke. "Shameless. What example is this?" Elsa kept her eyes forward, her heart a drum against her ribs. John sat like a granite bluff beside her, unmovable. After the service, the shunning was instant. As they filed out, a burly farm boy, the miller's son, shoved Hans roughly. "Make way for the charity case," he sneered. In her hired hand. Before Elsa could react, John was there. He didn't shout. He simply placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder, stopping him cold. "You will apologize," John stated, his voice low but carrying. The boy tried to shrug him off, fear flashing in his eyes. "Mida says." "I am speaking to you," John interrupted, his gaze unwavering. "Apologize." A muttered apology was given. John released him and turned to Hans. "You all right, son?" Hans stood taller. "Yes, sir." The valley folk watched, stunned into silence. The invisible John McCready had just drawn a very visible line. Back at the homestead, John began to hitch his horse to the sled. "What are you doing?" Elsa asked, stepping off the porch. "Leaving," he said, not meeting her eyes. "My presence makes it harder. I give them a target. My solitude, it's simpler." Our loneliness was not simple. It was a slow starvation. Their silence was not kindness. We were already in hell before they ever spoke a word. John stopped, his hands still on the harness. "What do you need, Elsa?" "We need you," she whispered, the admission hanging in the crisp air. "The children, they have laughed more these past days than in all the months before. And I have remembered what it is to not be utterly alone." He turned to face her. "I'm a hard man, set in my ways. All I have is land and a name folks misuse." "You have loyalty," she said, stepping closer. "You sold something to buy that food, didn't you? It wasn't just surplus." John looked at the ground, then back at her, his defenses down. "My rifle. My father's Spencer." Elsa's hand flew to her mouth. "John, why?" "Because watching you fight a losing battle from my ridge was worse than any winter," he said, his voice rough. "And because I was lonely. So god-awfully lonely. The greatest courage is not in enduring alone, but in choosing to reach out." Elsa reached for his rough hand. "Then stay. Do not be lonely anymore." "Marry me," John said. The words were not a question, but a solemn offer. Elsa froze. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated. "I can't give you an easy life in town. But I can give you a safe home, a full larder, and my word that I will stand before you and these children until my last breath. If they'll have me. The valley will never accept it. Then we will build our world right here," he said, gesturing to the land. "You, me, and these four. That is a country enough for me." Elsa looked at this strong, quiet, wounded man. She thought of Lars, and knew with a deep certainty he would want them to live, and to be loved. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, John." The cabin door burst open. The four children tumbled out, cheering. They had been listening. "He's staying," Sven yelled. Ingrid ran and wrapped her arms around John's leg. "Papa John." He looked down at them, his eyes bright, then back at Elsa. A true, gentle smile finally broke through. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick. "I'm staying." The circuit rider married them a week later in the main room of John's ranch house. No one from the valley came, save for the old trapper who sometimes traded with John. It did not matter. The house was warm, the pantry was stocked, and the sound of laughter filled the spaces that silence had owned for too long. Spring finally softened the land. John and Elsa stood on the ranch porch, watching Hans and Sven help move the calves to new pasture while Ingrid showed Lise how to scatter grain for the chickens. Elsa leaned into John's solid shoulder. "Any regrets?" John asked quietly, his arm around her. Elsa looked at the greening hills, then up at her husband's weathered, kind face. Not a single one. They had survived the winter. They had survived the hunger. And in the barren season, they had planted something far more enduring, a family forged not by chance, but by choice. If this story of unexpected grace and chosen family resonated with you, please like this video. It helps Winds of Thought share more tales of hope and resilience. What moment between John and Elsa moved you the most? Let's talk in the comments. And subscribe to Winds of Thought for more journeys into the human heart. Thank you for watching.